AI is not like saying it's different types of cars. It's more like saying it's transportation. From an impact perspective, you could be comparing a bicycle to a jet plane.
Hello, and welcome to Environment Variables, brought to you by the Green Software Foundation. In each episode, we discuss the latest news and events surrounding green software. On our show, you can expect candid conversations with top experts in their field who have a passion for how to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of software. I'm your host, Chris Adams.
So hello and welcome to This Week in Green Software, the podcast where we explore the latest developments in sustainable software development. I'm your guest host today, Anne Currie. You're not going to hear the dulcet tones of Chris Adams today. It's going to be me, and we'll be diving into one of the most pressing and rapidly evolving areas of sustainability, artificial intelligence. As AI technologies become increasingly integral to our daily lives, their environmental impact cannot be overlooked, but also can't be overstated either. There's a lot of work that we need to do to align green and AI. And that's where leaders like Boris, my guest today, come in. As head of AI sustainability at Salesforce, Boris is at the forefront of efforts to make AI more energy efficient and environmentally responsible. But not just that, just better, just more sustainable in the sense that we'll actually be able to grow AI because it is one of probably the most demanded technology the world has ever seen. So we don't want to be saying to people, don't do it. His work includes initiatives like the AI Energy Score, a benchmarking tool developed in collaboration with Hugging Face, Cohere, and the Carnegie Mellon University. Today, we'll be discussing how Salesforce is addressing the environmental challenges for AI and the importance of standardized reporting. So let's get started. Boris, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm Boris. I lead AI sustainability at Salesforce. At Salesforce, sustainability has been a core value, and artificial intelligence is a big part of how we bring products to our customers. So the merging of the two was kind of a natural progression, and excited to dive in with you.
Excellent. Yes, this will be, and I'll warn you now, Boris, as everybody's learned that we have a script for doing these podcasts and we just go totally off them as immediately we start chatting about the stuff, which is absolutely fine. So it's a reminder to everybody that everything we talk about today will be linked to in the show notes below. And as I said, my name is Anne Currie. I'm one of the co-authors of O'Reilly's new book on this subject, Building Green Software, which actually came out before the giant AI boom, or just at the start of the giant AI boom. So there's a bit about that, but actually, oddly enough, there's quite a lot about the kind of stuff we'll be talking about now in the book. So if you're interested in this, read Building Green Software. So the first question, Boris, Salesforce have recently introduced the AI Energy Score, as I mentioned, with Hugging Face and a whole load of other folk. Can you tell me a little bit about what it is?
Yeah, so when we look at AI, we can think about it as a term that encompasses a huge variety of different technologies. It's not, I saw a great description recently where it's like AI is not like saying it's different types of cars. It's more like saying it's transportation. From an impact perspective, you could be comparing a bicycle to a jet plane. And that's definitely what we've started seeing. So this project is really based on pioneering research from Dr. Sasha Lucioni with Hugging Face. She created a benchmarking approach for comparing the energy efficiency of AI models and found a wide range, which tells you that we as users and as product creators can have a huge impact by selecting the right model for the right task. But the problem is there hasn't really been a way to compare the energy efficiency of models in an apples to apples way. And also there's a lot of models that are closed source, so you're not able to actually test them yourself. So that led us to the conclusion that we need some sort of unified methodology, some sort of unified place to easily see and compare the energy efficiency of these models to enable that choice. And so that's where AI Energy Score came in. It's been about 8 months. We launched it in February this year at the AI Action Summit in Paris. It was really well received. We were really happy to have the positive feedback. And we launched with over 150 models on there. But we didn't want it to be a one-time release. We also included a way for folks to submit their models, both open and closed source, to really start building from there and sharing transparently the different impacts.
Yeah, it is. So it's interesting. Boris, you know that I have been pursuing you avidly to come onto the Environment Variables podcast for months and months and months. And the reason why was when I spoke to you quite a long time ago now, you gave me an excellent stat, which is that you were seeing a 60,000-fold difference between some models doing something and another model doing something. And I thought that was interesting in and of itself. I've used that stat. I've stolen your stats shamelessly all over the place since then. But one of the things that I found very interesting about it was it didn't hugely surprise me because I used to be more involved in efficiency. And I've spoken to two groups of people about that stat, really. People who are efficiency experts who just went, yeah, of course, 60,000. Of course it's 60,000. I would expect it to be more. And the other, so it's either people have that reaction, like, yeah, duh, of course, 60,000, that's only to be expected to something at the beginning. And AI really is at the beginning. There's lots of untuned stuff out there. And the other people, which is the vast majority of people, all the ordinary people, when I say 60,000, they say 60. Yeah, that's a lot. And I say, no, not 60, 60,000. And they go, yes, 60, that's a lot. It's really, there's no good understanding of the effects, potential effects of efficiency and choosing the right tool for the job.
No, that's super interesting. And I think I've seen both sides of those reactions myself. And I do think actually it's undercounting where we are today. I think there's a lot more efficient methods to do things. And at the same time, the frontier end of models, not even counting things like video generation or multi-agent systems, those have gotten more potentially energy intensive too. But yeah, I think it just speaks to the fact that this is a world that, as people, we have a hard time really understanding and contextualizing. This is artificial intelligence, and it's hard for us to contextualize the energy demands of these different systems. It's just so ephemeral.
Yeah, and people don't realize what's an enormous difference it would make choosing the right tool for the job. And it's cheaper, it's more resilient, and it's so much greener, 60,000 times, and as you say, even more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, a lot of the time I've heard folks say, well, if, it's just cheaper, so wouldn't people naturally choose the more, the cheaper option? The thing is, right now, energy is such a small piece of the pie for the cost. And the actual costs of these models are also influenced by market conditions, venture capital funding, different things like that. So the actual cost that you're seeing, like per token, not necessarily reflective of the significant differences in energy. So that's why it's important to actually have that energy metric.
Yes, I mean, it is fantastically good. Another area where I've seen the same reaction and an area where I think is really interesting is DeepSeek. When DeepSeek came out in the beginning of this year, it was only the beginning of this year, it's the first model to really say, I think it's good enough now, let's just make it a bit cheaper. And they said, well, we've made it 10 times cheaper. We've used all of these techniques, which are not new techniques. They're all described in Building Green Software. And they sort of made it 10 times cheaper. And again, I tended to see the results of that split into several groups. One saying 10 times, I don't believe it. I don't even believe it's possible. The other group saying, well, if they'd applied those tools, then I would expect 100 times, 1,000 times, 100,000 times more effective. And other people saying, I don't think they really actually did it. So we could have done this years ago, and we could have done this. But all of those things are an interesting reaction.
Totally.
10x.
Yeah, an interesting example actually from Salesforce's own product. So Agentforce is our flagship product. And looking at the architecture, we use a mix of our own models developed in-house, some external frontier models, and then some, standard software. What's interesting is we have a section called the trust layer, where we're doing a lot of validation and checking, make sure, bad things don't happen. And we've used internally developed fine-tuned models instead of those frontier LLMs, and they reduce, they improve efficiency by 99%. And so hearing numbers like that, and there's probably a few nines on there depending on what we're comparing to, but we can very confidently say it's 99% at least. And yeah, I think it just speaks to the big differences where we can easily say a number like that, which maybe in other contexts that are more physical in the world, that kind of sounds outlandish.
Yes, it's an interesting one. A friend of mine who is an efficiency expert tuned a Go library for a task that they wanted to do for their own work. And they reduced, and it was a tiny tweak they made to the library. They just noticed it wasn't, because with AI, everything's repeated over and over and over again. Tiny tweaks can make an enormous difference in how much energy is used. And he said he made this tweak and then he ran it again, and it was 1,000,000 times better. And he said it was so embarrassing. He couldn't actually, because he thought, I can't tell anybody it's 1,000,000 times better because it'll sound like I'm just lying.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I totally get that. I think we're going to continue seeing tremendous improvements by really focusing on those smaller domain-specific models rather than just pushing the kind of the size frontier as has been happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So I think DeepSeek was I don't really mind whether DeepSeek were just making the whole thing up and they didn't make any savings at all. I think the interesting thing about them was that they illustrated that there were lots of people who went, yes, I'm quite happy with what there is. I just want it to be 10 times less expensive so I can run it in my headset or run it on my personal PIN or whatever.
And no. We're focused on efficiency here, but what's interesting is I'm sure you've seen with efficiency of these models, we are seeing, reduced costs, and that's actually resulting in a rebound effect, the famous Jevons paradox. No. And so when we think about what are the things that can be done to ensure AI is sustainable, efficiency is central to that. But we published recently an outlook on this topic where we also introduce two other pillars, so to speak, on either side. So first is on the demand side. We call it smart demand. So ensuring that you're using AI wisely, applying AI where it's needed, using the right type of AI, and having transparency, making the right decisions, that type of thing. So we want to have that even upstream of efficiency. So then you have on the efficiency side, there's on the model side, but also on the hardware side, as well as things like data efficiency, ensuring that you're not just throwing all of this unstructured raw data and making the models process it, actually doing cleaning, having metadata, et cetera. And then finally, once you've figured all of those things out and you feel good about the demand and the efficiency, the AI has to get powered somehow. So thinking about the supply side, ensuring there's enough clean power, ensuring you have sustainable water resources. So I think it's all those three things, the smart demand, the efficiency, and the clean supply side that we need to be thinking about.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. Efficiency won't solve the energy use problem really at all. Or efficiency is great because it's kind of like the driver of growth. It will mean that more people get AI and they really want it. That's why we're in the position we are. ChatGPT was the biggest growing technology in history. What was it? It was 1 million users after 5 days, 100 million users after 2 months, 700 million users today, a tenth of the adult population of the world. It is, there's no fighting against the fact that people really want it. But getting it cheaper will mean that more people get it. And that's a good thing. But as you say, we're going to have to align it with renewable availability. And the interesting thing is there are plenty of countries that are doing that. Not everyone is doing brute force as a way of doing their AI. India and China are not doing it by brute force, or they're not primarily doing it by brute force. They have a long-term strategy for aligning it with that renewable.
Yeah. No, and we really see a sustainable path for AI as not just a way to reduce the environmental impacts and kind of things like health impacts on people. Those are, of course, tremendously important. But with the way things are trending right now, existing power systems might not be able to support this full-scale development of AI as it's currently going. So we see sustainability as a key way to de-risk and ensure the long-term success of this technology in and of itself.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah. So, which is going to take me to my second question of today, which is a strangely worded question. When I first read it, it's from a recent Salesforce survey and report. And the report, and again, the link to the report and the survey will be in the show notes below, said that 65% of sustainability professionals believe their companies need to balance the benefits of AI with their environmental costs. And I read that, I thought, well, that's a bit weird. What about the other 35%? They're sustainability. Why don't they think they need to be? It actually, so I read the report and it said it again. I thought, it's weird. So I read the underlying survey at the beginning of it. And the underlying survey says, basically, all sustainability experts want to do sustainable things. 65% believe it's possible with AI, but 35% believe it's not possible with AI. So what's your comment? I think those sustainability professionals are not doing anybody a favor, but those 35%, because we've got to make it, so we've got to align it. But what's your thought? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, with AI, there are, the direct impacts that we've kind of been talking about so far. Then there are, of course, amazing use cases. Within our own product line, we have a product called Net Zero Cloud, which helps companies quantify and reduce their environmental impacts. And so bringing in this agentic AI layer into that has been tremendously helpful. So we've already started seeing the benefits there. On the other hand, there are also unsustainable AI use cases like, fossil fuel extraction and things like that. So I think it's important to really think about the entire potential landscape of these impacts when talking about it. I think the survey in particular referenced AI use cases like improving efficiency, helping sustainability professionals do all of that reporting and documentation that's starting to take up more and more of everyone's time. And from that perspective, I do think there's so much impact in just helping these folks that are limited in their budget and resources at these big companies do less, paperwork and less boring work, and actually spend time diving into their organizations and figuring out how to push on those leverage points to drive impact.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, I don't want to do a giant Salesforce ad here, but I found Salesforce an interesting example because there are lots of ways that you could potentially reduce your customers' fossil fuel use whilst building their business, in the same way that cutting costs is good, helps you grow your business and presumably things like using agentic AI to line up all your meetings. If you take a transatlantic flight, you make sure you meet all your customers. You've got AI constantly chasing everybody to make sure that the meeting stays on, and actually that's better for you in terms of the use of your time as a salesperson, as well as using the transatlantic crossing. Well, is that the kind of thing that you're thinking?
Yeah, that's totally right. I mentioned a specific, sustainability focused product with Net Zero Cloud, but we're also thinking about how do our the remainder of our products also contribute to sustainability. A good example is our field service product, which helps companies better service, physical assets out in the field, whether that's air conditioning at someone's home or, a substation. And there's a lot that AI can do to make that whole experience more efficient, prevent people from taking trucks out to certain places if, the individual can do some things themselves directed by, some agentic system. So that type of thing is I think an even bigger potential for impact rather than, these use cases that are for sustainability professionals. I think, bringing efficiency and bringing this power out to more users is going to be really powerful.
Yeah, it's quite a game changer for a lot of businesses as well. I mean, I talked about this oddly enough when one of my co-authors, Sarah Bergman, was on Environment Variables but last year, and we were talking about minimizing truck rolls, which is exactly what we're saying about. You want to absolutely minimize the amount of time that people are a whole team of people are having to hop in a truck and spend their entire day driving to. I mean, she's from Sweden, and a truck roll could be basically the entire length of the country. And to snow, and then you'd have to have a special team to handle it. So anything you can do to minimize that, to spot problems in advance and head them off, and it just improves the entire efficiency of a company whilst also saving petrol and all these kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're thinking also with this energy transition, utilities are entering in a pretty different relationship with their customers, where you have things like virtual power plants, you have EVs, you have distributed energy, solar on people's homes. So there's a whole different relationship that utilities are now having with their customers. And, that's kind of what Salesforce does, is software relationships. So really enabling those companies to step into kind of this future in a very different relationship. So there's so many opportunities here for sure.
Yeah, really. Yeah, I mean, the whole virtual power station thing is absolutely fascinating because storage is going to be such an issue for solar and wind, and at the same time we're putting giant battery. I mean, I've got a Powell, which a few years ago I thought, well, that's great. That's like it's like 10 kilowatts or whatever. And, but compare that to a car engine.
Right.
It's nothing. And every garage is going to end up with one of those inside. Yeah.
Yeah. And every one of those is some sort of relationship to manage, so, and the tremendous amount of data that can be used to prevent maintenance and, do things like optimization.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So something that fascinates me at the moment, which is a bit different from agentic AI, which is very interesting, is something you talked a little bit about, how you make sure that AI runs on top of runs on renewable power and investments in grids and all that kind of stuff that's going to make that possible. It very much. So when you talked about demand management earlier, I thought you were going to talk about something called demand side response, which is a use of the grid where you try and steer people to run expensive workloads when there's renewable power available, which of course again is something that AI is pretty good at.
Yeah, no, definitely. I should have mentioned that for sure. I mean, there are some studies done recently that just a small reduction in the annual amount of availability needed for some of these AI workloads could free up something like nearly 100 gigawatt hours of grid capacity. So having a little flexibility in your workloads, whether AI or not, could have huge impacts. And like you said, AI is perfectly suited to identify these patterns to predict the opportunities. Yeah,
it is really interesting. I mean, some of it, and actually, a gigawatt is about a nuclear power station's worth, isn't it? So 100 gigawatts is the equivalent of building 100 new nuclear power stations.
100 gigawatts, right.
Yeah, which of course is interesting. So something interests me at the moment is last year, China built 1 gigawatt, so 1 new nuclear power station's worth of renewable capacity, mostly solar, every day. This year is more like that every 15 to 18 hours. Yeah, it's astonishing, isn't it? But the interesting thing about that is that just building it is not the end of their strategy. That's only the beginning of their strategy. Then they've got another strategy to get people to actually use it because, solar is not always sunny. It's not always windy. It's, you're not always in the right place. So they have a nationwide strategy, which they have a name for, which is, East Data, West Compute strategy, where they say, well, look, we've got a whole load of cities in the East. There's no room for more solar farms there. There's no room for nuclear power stations. There's no room for data centers. We'll put all of those in the West, which is empty. And that is the way, and we'll tell everybody that is what we're going to do. That is what you should, that's the mindset you should be thinking about how we align industry and renewables. India are taking an interestingly different route. But that, again, very context aware that they're saying, well, in India, it's very sunny. So we're going to really double down on solar. But even in India, it's not sunny at night. So what we're going to do is have time of use tariffs, which encourage industry to do stuff during the day and discourage it from doing stuff at night. Again, they've said just building it is not enough. We need a strategy for how it's going to be used. America, I think to a certain extent, people become a bit depressed by America because the American strategy is just brute force. We've got loads of money. And therefore, so it's not a very green strategy, but it is not the only strategy out there.
Yeah. I do wish, I do wish there was more emphasis on some of this planning and a lot of this coordination, especially in the US. And we talk about, we released priorities for AI sustainability when we think about policy and reforming transmission and permitting for clean power and for moving power around in general is such a big opportunity for sure. Part of the reason, we're seeing a lot of on-site natural gas generation for these large AI training clusters that are popping up. And in general, actually looking at the proportion of energy that supplies data centers, it's just over half due to fossil fuels.
Yeah. And,
a lack of transmission infrastructure is one of the blockers to having more clean energy.
Yeah. It's, I never consider it to be a good sign when you give your data center a name. If your data center is called Colossus, that's not a good, even Stargate's not a good sign.
But the names are so cool. No.
They're too cool. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it is, I think we all need to remember that the American strategy is not the only strategy out there at the moment. And Europe does not have to follow the American strategy because we're not as rich as America. So, it's, there are other strategies to take. And I think those will win in the long run because renewable power is so cheap if you use it properly.
Yeah. Looking at it from an economic perspective, renewable energy kind of pencils out as the winner, and in most cases. And it's really about some of those other blockers, getting grid connections, getting in the queues that are resulting in natural gas turbines being trucked into these 5 gigawatt data centers. So on an equal playing field, clean energy should be the right choice. But now we have to think about what are the things blocking that actually happening.
Yeah. Yes, it is really interesting, isn't it? So if you had to advise developers to do, if you were giving advice to developers about what to do, or not developers, whole enterprises, I'm going to start. Before I ask you that, I'm going to say, I know you're not going to say this, which is one of the reasons why I've asked you to come on, which is so many people in the green sector say what you should do is less AI, do it less of it. It's completely incompatible. Like those 35% of people from the Salesforce respondents, the sustainability focus, it's just fundamentally incompatible. And I think what that really does is turn people off the green software movement, because they go, well, it's incompatible and I want AI because everybody wants AI. It's the most popular thing the world's ever seen. So I can't be green, therefore I just won't think about that anymore. And I think we need to be constantly reminding people that the 65% are right, not the 35%, that there isn't a way of aligning it. Say, what's your thoughts on that?
I agree. I don't think it's black or white as you know, it's that the attitude you're describing seems to say. It's AI on or off. I mean, it's one way or another. Folks have been using a type of AI within the various products we're familiar with for years, if not some decades in some cases. This is definitely a different beast now. But I think as sustainability folks or folks working on the space, I think we're missing a crucial tool if we totally write it off. And I think we also have an opportunity to push this technology into the right direction. So I think the first advice would be to push for transparency. As we already said, there's a huge variety of impacts, a huge spectrum, and pushing for that transparency will lead to us having more choice and to be able to say, I want to take the bike rather than the jet plane for this specific task. And in some cases, you already do have some transparency. Thinking about the AI energy score, the vast majority of the models on there are the open source models. But even so, for a lot of use cases, you can find a good model on there that'll suit your needs. Now, the most popular frontier LLMs that people are most familiar with are not on there, but users of those models, those products, can advocate for added transparency. So there have been some recent disclosures from some of those companies, and while those are really great signs, unfortunately they're not comparable to each other. I won't name names, but
go on, name your names. Can you just drop some names?
No, it's all good. OpenAI, Mistral, and Google for Gemini over the last few months have released some sort of either mention in a blog or, in Mistral's case, LCA kind of summary. In Google's case, it was a blog and a technical report. So, these folks are starting to understand that it's important to share this information.
Yeah.
But each one of them did it in their own slight way. So the data points you don't always have the data points. They're not always comparable. Sometimes you don't know what the methodology is. And I think that proves the point we were making and we are making with AI energy score is that when you go into a lot and get a car, you're assuming that the fuel efficiency number or, the ABC rating in Europe is apples to apples. But in these cases, these notable cases over the past few months, that hasn't really been the situation where you're actually seeing numbers that look similar, but digging a bit below the surface, you realize they're not the same and can't really drive those decisions.
And it's worth noting that the ChatGPT, the OpenAI models and the Gemini models are so much more used than all other models. I mean, they're just so much more used that it's absolutely worth everybody putting pressure, if they can, on OpenAI and Gemini to be moving forward with that and then telling us about it, because any tiny improvement they make will have such an effect.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because they're just so used. And, they've got a lot of money to put into efficiency improvements are expensive to make. So, when you've got scale and you've got loads of money, those are the folk that we should be expecting to make those investments.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add on our own, and thinking about the Agent Force product, which it's different than some of these releases that I mentioned, which are just focused, kind of on specific models. Our product incorporates a variety of models as well as, a kind of a non-AI architecture as well. Okay. So we've been thinking about what's the best way to quantify this, where some of the upstream data where we would be reliant on is actually not shared with us for these same reasons. So we've been also thinking about the best way to quantify that and then bring that to our customers. So we've made some progress on that, and hopefully, later on this year, we'll have something to share. And we want to be as transparent as possible on what we do know, what the gaps are, and how we can all together push for those gaps to close for everyone. Yeah,
because it is good. I mean, it is interesting, because it's in everybody's best interests to have. We can't grow AI until we're out of energy and we'll drop off the end of the world. It's not in anyone's best interest to do that. There are good reasons for China and India not thinking about doing those kind of things.
Yeah. I recently saw a stat that I don't have it off the top of my head, but billions, tens of billions of data center projects have gotten stalled or canceled due to public opposition. And a lot of the time it's, concerns around the local water table, enough energy supply, or just the fact that some of these developments are very opaque, several layers of shell corporations. And then I think that the environmental story, it doesn't help. I do think coming at it with much more transparency upfront on these impacts would help prevent these types of cancellations, this type of resistance that's, I think, only growing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. It's interesting because on the one hand, yes, AI is phenomenally popular. But at the other hand, yes, nobody ever wants a data center in their backyard, particularly now. So it's been a really interesting talk today. I feel we've covered a lot of stuff. So is there anything that you want to cover that we haven't yet talked about?
Yeah, I'd say AI is a lot of different technologies. We need to be thinking about the direct impacts, potential solutions that can come from AI. It's a really nuanced and challenging topic, and I think having kind of a black and white perspective on it, I think that's lacking something. So I do recommend folks to kind of dive into it and get educated and test out the different tools that are out there. Really understand, try to understand how these things work. And I think only then can we all push for a more sustainable AI future. Once we really get our hands dirty, dive into the research as well as what the solutions can be. So I would just challenge folks to do that rather than, in some cases, write it off.
Yes, I really like what you're saying there. Is that, and there is a kind of subtle undercurrent in what you're saying as well, which is to have higher expectations. In that, if you experiment, there is so much better. As you say, there is no AI. There's no one AI. There are really good AIs for a particular use case and really bad AIs for a particular use case, and you won't really know what those. And the difference is like. You thought your project will fail because it'll be too expensive. So, like my friend who tuned the Go library and found that it reduced the amount of energy required 1 millionfold. That made the difference between them being able to run that project and not run that project. It was about not only finding the right tool, but also making sure that tool making that tool fit for purpose.
Yeah, not only a cost thing, but I've talked to folks where the latency of the product has actually been one of the main drivers for choosing more sustainable options. So the product was too slow to respond because it's using those frontier models. It's using so much compute. It's running your queries through those massive trillion parameter neural networks. And it's, from a user perspective, it's just too slow. And so really tuning these architectures to using more domain-specific, smaller models, it's a much better user experience. And of course, you lower the cost, lower the energy.
Yeah. Which kind of calls back to the analogy you used before about, do you take the bike or do you take the jet plane? It's because sometimes a jet plane can just be a really, really bad tool for getting to the shops at the end of your road. You don't want to go on a jet plane. You want to go on a bike, or you want to walk, or you want to, it's choosing the right tool for the job.
Yeah, exactly.
And AI is such a range of tools. It's not just ChatGPT. There are thousands of, how many models? It's like 1 million different models on a Hugging Face these days that people are.
Yeah, it's in the millions, definitely. Yeah. And what's really cool about the open source movement and, Hugging Face really being the platform for that is folks can take existing models and build from there and fine tune from there. And that's where all real world analogies fall apart. You can't copy a car and take it and add something on. So that's what I think is so amazing here. There is this really strong open source community and really talented individuals that are focused on exactly these things, on fine tuning, on creating domain specific models for the different use cases. So I think it's really cool.
Yeah. And it's a good reminder that our listeners today do not have to be Go efficiency experts or Python efficiency experts or anything else. They can just, there are 1 million of those already out there, and you just need to find the right one. Maybe, the best use of ChatGPT in your project might be to find the right model for you to use that is not ChatGPT. Because, it's something you'll be doing over and over again. It's going to make an enormous difference. But yeah, so I feel that everybody's brains might be full because we've had a very intensive podcast today, and I've really enjoyed it. And I think it's been absolutely excellent. So thank you. It's taken a while to get you on the podcast, and I'm very pleased that we did.
Yeah, it's been great. I've loved it, and looking forward to more.
Well, so thank you very much, and goodbye from me. And I'm sure I will speak to everybody again the next time I am a guest podcast host on Environment Variables. So goodbye.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. Just a reminder to follow Environment Variables on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please do leave a rating and review if you like what we're doing. It helps other people discover the show. And of course, we'd love to have more listeners. To find out more about the Green Software Foundation, please visit greensoftware.foundation. That's greensoftware.foundation in any browser. Thanks again, and see you in the next episode.